I'm Layla, 34 years old, and a self-made entrepreneur who started with nothing but determination. Looking back, I still remember my ex-husband's smug face when he told me I'd never reach his status. The sweetest vindication came when I saw that same face jaw dropped staring at my name on the Forbes list. The journey from being belittled to building my empire wasn't easy, but it was worth every struggle. Before I dive into how I went from being talked down to becoming a self-made millionaire, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you want more stories about women breaking barriers. I grew up in a small town outside Austin, Texas, with big dreams but limited resources. My parents were hardworking people who taught me the value of perseverance, but they couldn't afford to pay for my college education. By the time I turned 19, I was juggling 3 jobs to put myself through community college. Mornings at a local cafe, evenings waiting tables at an upscale restaurant downtown, and weekends doing administrative work for a small business. It was exhausting, that I was determined to create a better future for myself. That fateful evening at La Maison, the upscale restaurant where I worked, changed the trajectory of my life. Andrew Thompson walked in with a group of investment bankers, all of them wearing suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I was assigned to their table, and from the moment I approached, Andrew couldn't take his eyes off me. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a confidence that commanded attention. When the group left, he lingered behind, leaving me a generous tip along with his business card. "I'd like to take you to dinner sometime," he said with a charming smile. "Somewhere where you don't have to serve it." I was hesitant at first. Men like Andrew Thompson with their tailored suits and trust funds didn't typically date girls like me. But his persistence won me over, and one dinner turned into several. He was 32, 8 years my senior, with a world of experience that fascinated me. Born into a family with deep connections in finance, Andrew had attended the best schools and had taken over his father's investment firm, expanding it significantly. Our worlds couldn't have been more different. While I counted pennies for textbooks, he flew private jets to weekend getaways. He introduced me to a lifestyle I had only seen in magazines: fine dining, Broadway shows, weekend trips to the Hamptons. When he gifted me a designer dress for our third date, I was both flattered and uncomfortable. "You need to look the part if you're going to be with me," he explained, and I ignored the slight undertone of condescension, choosing instead to see it as generosity. The first time I met his friends, I felt like an exhibit at a museum. They studied me with curious eyes, asking questions about my humble background with feigned interest. One of his college friends, Jessica, pulled me aside during a dinner party. "Just some friendly advice," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Andrew has always had a thing for charity cases. Just enjoy it while it lasts." Her words stung, but when I mentioned them to Andrew later, he dismissed her comment as jealousy. "They're just not used to someone so refreshingly real," he assured me, kissing my forehead like I was a child who needed consoling. Despite these undercurrents, I fell deeply in love with Andrew. He was intelligent, ambitious, and seemed to adore me. I worked hard to fit into his world, studying wine lists, learning about art, practicing proper table etiquette, all while continuing my education and jobs. The contrast between serving champagne to wealthy patrons and then drinking it at Andrew's side the next evening was not lost on me. Around this time, I had started making handmade jewelry as a creative outlet, using techniques I learned from online tutorials and materials purchased with my tips. I created unique pieces that friends and coworkers began to notice and request. "You have a good eye," Andrew commented when I showed him my creations. "Maybe you could sell these at local craft fairs or something." The suggestion was supportive but tinged with that same subtle condescension, as if my creative endeavor was cute but inconsequential. Just 6 months into our relationship, Andrew proposed with a diamond ring that made my coworkers gasp. My parents, upon meeting him for the first time at our engagement dinner, pulled me aside with concerns. "Honey, you barely know him," my mother whispered, "and your lives are so different." "I love him, Mom," I insisted, "and he loves me for who I am." I truly believe that. I didn't see how his gentle corrections of my behavior, his makeover of my wardrobe, his subtle reshaping of me were all signs of something less than acceptance. All I knew was that I had found someone who showed me a world of possibilities beyond my small-town dreams, and I was eager to build a life with him. During our engagement, I set up an online store for my jewelry on a small platform. To my surprise, orders started coming in. When I shared my excitement with Andrew, he patted my hand. "That's great, babe. A little spending money for you, though you won't need it soon enough." I didn't realize then that this statement foreshadowed the power dynamic that would define our marriage. I was too busy envisioning a partnership where we both contributed in our own ways. I still had my dreams and ambitions, even as I prepared to become Mrs. Thompson. The whirlwind romance moved quickly toward marriage, with Andrew's family taking control of most wedding decisions. His mother hired a wedding planner who rarely consulted me, and when I voiced opinions, they were often overruled in favor of tradition and appropriateness. "Just let them handle it," Andrew would say. "They know how these things are done in our circle." Our circle. Not my circle. Never my circle. But I was determined to make it work, believing that love would bridge our differences. I didn't yet understand that the bridge was being built with my compromises alone, while Andrew remained firmly on his side of the divide. The wedding was a lavish affair at the Plaza Hotel, with 400 guests, most of whom I had never met. I felt more like a prop than a bride wearing a dress chosen primarily by Andrew's mother and sisters. My small family looked out of place among the sea of wealthy, connected people who made up Andrew's world. When I walked down the aisle, I caught my father's concerned expression beneath his proud smile. After a honeymoon in the Maldives, we settled into Andrew's penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side. The place was immaculate, decorated by a professional with minimal input from either of us. It never felt like home to me, more like an expensive hotel where I was a permanent guest. I would later realize this was a metaphor for our marriage. The first few months were a difficult adjustment. Andrew expected me to quit all my jobs, including my weekend administrative work, which I had kept even after reducing my waitressing hours. "My wife doesn't need to work," he declared, as if bestowing a gift. "You can focus on being a society wife. Charity lunches supporting my career, entertaining." I felt adrift without the structure of work and school. My days stretched empty before me while Andrew left early and returned late from his office. I tried to fill my time by expanding my jewelry business, setting up a small workspace in our guest room. Andrew referred to it as my little hobby room and would occasionally pop his head in to check on my arts and crafts. When I made my first $1,000 in monthly sales, I excitedly shared the news over dinner. Andrew raised his eyebrows, seeming genuinely surprised. "Well, look at you," he said, reaching for his wine glass. "Next you'll be asking for a corner office at my firm." He chuckled at his own joke. "Actually," I ventured, "I was thinking about taking some business classes to learn how to grow this properly." His smile tightened slightly. "Is that really necessary? It's a nice distraction for you, but let's not get carried away." That night marked the beginning of my secret rebellion. The next day, I enrolled in evening business classes at a nearby college, telling Andrew I had joined a book club. In those classes, I met Gabrielle Johnson, a former executive turned professor, who took an interest in my situation. "You have good instincts and a viable product," she told me after reviewing my business plan. "But you need to take yourself seriously if you expect others to." Gabrielle became my mentor and friend, the one person in my new life who saw me as more than Andrew's wife. Under her guidance, I developed a more sophisticated business model and marketing strategy. My sales began to increase steadily, and I reinvested every penny into better materials and website development. As my confidence grew and my business tensions increased at home, Andrew began questioning my absences and expressing annoyance when I was working on orders during evenings and weekends. "I didn't marry you to be ignored," he complained one night when I was finishing a rush order for a client. "It will just take another hour," I promised. "This is important to me." "More important than your husband," he challenged, his tone making me feel guilty for having interests beyond him. The first major fight came when I approached Andrew about investing some of our money into expanding my business. I had prepared a detailed presentation showing my growth projections and plans for scaling up. "Sweetie," he said after barely glancing at my carefully prepared materials, "you'll never understand how real business works. You should just enjoy the lifestyle I provide." He patted my hand condescendingly. "Leave the serious financial decisions to me." I felt as if I'd been slapped. "This is a real business, Andrew. My sales have doubled every month for the past quarter." "Playing with beads isn't a business," he scoffed. "It's a cute pastime. And frankly, I'm getting tired of you prioritizing it over your actual responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" I demanded. decorating the apartment, attending lunches with your mother, being available whenever you decide to come home. The argument escalated, quickly ending with Andrew sleeping in the guest room. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened, but something fundamental had shifted between us. I began to see more clearly how he viewed me not as an equal partner, but as an accessory to his life. Social gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable. Andrew would introduce me simply as my wife, without mentioning my name or anything about me. At a dinner party with his colleagues, I overheard him responding to a question about what I did. "Oh, Layla keeps busy with her little crafts," he said dismissively. "It's adorable how seriously she takes it." Each of these moments chipped away at my self-confidence. I began to wonder if perhaps he was right, if I was out of my depth in trying to build something of my own. But then orders would come in, customers would send glowing reviews, and Gabrielle would remind me of how far I'd come already. 2 years into our marriage, I discovered texts on Andrew's phone from his secretary Sarah. They weren't explicitly inappropriate, but the flirtatious undertones were unmistakable. When I confronted him, his response was illuminating. "Don't be ridiculous," he said, snatching his phone back. "You're overreacting. This is how people communicate in professional settings." "By calling their secretary gorgeous and commenting on her dress?" I challenged. "You wouldn't understand the nuances of executive relationships," he replied. "Maybe if you'd ever worked in a real company instead of playing entrepreneur, you'd get it." It was the first time I clearly saw the contempt beneath his supposed support. He didn't believe in me or my abilities. To him, I was still the waitress he had elevated to a better life, a fact for which I should be perpetually grateful. Despite this revelation, I wasn't ready to leave. Part of me still hoped I could prove myself to him, gain his respect, and transform our marriage into the partnership I had envisioned. I threw myself even more intensely into growing my business and education, often working late into the night after Andrew had gone to bed. Unknown to me, these were the final months of our life together, and the foundation for everything that would follow was being laid in those late-night hours at my jewelry workbench. 3 years into our marriage, my online jewelry business had grown from a cute hobby to a legitimate small business. I had a dedicated customer base, recurring orders from several boutiques, and was making enough profit to reinvest in better equipment and materials. Still, Andrew treated my work as inconsequential compared to his real business of investment banking. My secret meetings with Gabrielle had evolved into strategy sessions, where we mapped out an ambitious expansion plan. I had identified a niche in customizable, ethically sourced jewelry that wasn't being adequately served in the market. "You need significant capital to make this jump," Gabrielle advised during one of our coffee meetings. "Have you considered external investors?" "Andrew would never approve," I replied automatically, then paused, troubled by my own response. When had his approval become a requirement for my decisions? "Layla," Gabrielle said gently, "your business belongs to you, not your husband." Her words stayed with me as I returned to the penthouse that afternoon. Andrew had left for a 2-week business trip to Europe the day before, giving me rare time alone in the apartment. As I was searching for some documents in his home office to complete my tax filing, I came across a folder marked Financial Holdings. I hesitated only briefly before opening it. Andrew and I had separate finances, with him controlling the majority of our assets and providing me with a monthly allowance like a child. I had never questioned this arrangement, accepting his explanation that financial management was his expertise. What I found in that folder shook me to my core. Andrew's business was in trouble. Several high-risk investments had failed, and he had taken out significant loans to cover the losses. The documents showed a pattern of increasingly desperate financial maneuvers over the past year, all of which he had hidden from me. I was still processing this information when I heard the front door open. Andrew's voice called out, "Layla." My stomach dropped. He wasn't supposed to be back for another 10 days. "In here," I answered, too stunned to hide what I was doing. Andrew appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to anger when he saw the open folder on the desk. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, striding forward and snatching the papers from my hands. "Your trip ended early," I said, stupidly mind racing to process both his unexpected return and what I'd discovered. "Obviously," he snapped. "Now answer my question. Why are you going through my private financial documents?" I stood up, finding an unexpected calm. "I was looking for our tax information. I found something else instead. Why didn't you tell me the business is in trouble? Andrew's face flushed. Because it's none of your concern. I'm handling it. We're married, Andrew. Your financial problems affect me too. He laughed, a harsh sound unlike his usual polished chuckle. What exactly do you contribute to our finances, Layla? Your little bead shop, please. My business is growing, I defended. And if you'd ever taken it seriously, you'd know I could help with our finances now. Andrew's expression turned ugly. Help you with what exactly? Your community college business classes and craft fair experience? He shoved the papers back into the folder. This is exactly why I don't discuss real business with you. You wouldn't understand the first thing about what I do. I felt something shift inside me, a wall crumbling. Then explain it to me, Andrew. If we're in financial trouble, we should face it together. There is no we in this situation, he snapped. I made these investments. I'll resolve them. Your job is to keep being my wife, not to question my business decisions. And what does being your wife mean exactly? Being decorative, available, grateful? The questions that had been building for 3 years finally spilled out. Andrew's face twisted into a contemptuous smirk. It means knowing your place. You'll never match my status, Layla. Without me, you'd still be serving tables and living paycheck to paycheck. You should be grateful I gave you this life. The words hit me like physical blows. I had suspected this was how he truly saw me, but hearing it stated so bluntly left me breathless. Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound rage I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. Andrew checked his watch, dismissing my emotional response. I have a dinner meeting downtown. We'll talk about your snooping when I get back. He left me standing there, surrounded by the evidence of his failures and the wreckage of my illusions. I sank into his office chair, tears streaming down my face as the full weight of our fraudulent marriage settled on me. The luxury apartment, the designer clothes, the social status, all of it built on lies. His lies about his business success. My lies about being content as his accessory. For hours I sat in that chair thinking about the past 3 years and the gradual erosion of the person I had been before meeting Andrew. I thought about his constant belittlement of my ambitions, his refusal to see me as anything more than an extension of himself. I thought about Gabrielle's words, "Your business belongs to you." By the time I heard his key in the lock near midnight, I had made my decision. I had packed a single suitcase with personal items, my jewelry-making tools, and business records. I had transferred the small amount I had in my personal account to a new bank. I had called Gabrielle, who immediately offered her spare room until I found my feet. Andrew found me in the living room, suitcase by my side. "What's this supposed to be?" he asked, loosening his tie. "I'm leaving," I said simply. He laughed. "Don't be dramatic. Where would you even go? What would you do? You have nothing without me." "I have myself," I replied. "And that's something I almost lost by staying here." His amusement turned to anger. "You're making a huge mistake. You'll come crawling back within a week." I stood up, a strange calm settling over me. "No, Andrew, I won't." I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the coffee table. Next to it I left a note with just 2 words, "Watch me." As I walked out of the penthouse for the last time, carrying only what I could fit in one suitcase, I felt both terrified and more alive than I had in years. The life I was leaving had everything except the one thing I needed most: respect. The life ahead had nothing except the possibility of finding it again. The contrast between Andrew's penthouse and my new reality was stark. Gabrielle's spare room in Brooklyn was tiny compared to the walk-in closet I'd had before. After a week of job hunting, I found an even smaller studio apartment I could just barely afford. The bathroom sink also served as my kitchen sink, and my bed doubled as my couch, but it was mine. I paid for it with money I earned. Those first few months were a brutal adjustment. The divorce proceedings Andrew initiated were clearly designed to punish me for leaving. His lawyers argued that since my jewelry business had been developed during our marriage, he was entitled to a portion of it. The irony of him suddenly treating my little hobby as a valuable asset wasn't lost on me. I couldn't afford a high-powered attorney like his. But I found a young lawyer named Thomas who took my case at a reduced rate, believing in my side of the story. The legal battle dragged on for months, draining both my energy and my limited finances. During this time, Andrew alternated between threats and attempts at reconciliation. "You'll never survive without me," he texted one day. The next, I miss you. Come home and we can work this out. When neither approach worked, he escalated to having mutual friends reach out, painting himself as the abandoned husband blindsided by his ungrateful wife. To make ends meet while fighting the divorce battle, I took a job as a retail associate at a jewelry store during the day while working on my own pieces at night. The owner, Sylvia, recognized my knowledge of gems and design, eventually allowing me to help with custom client work. Every extra dollar went either to legal fees or back into my business. 3 months after leaving Andrew, I met with Gabrielle at our usual coffee shop, exhausted from working 60-hour weeks. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I admitted. Maybe I should just settle the divorce on his terms. Gabrielle studied me carefully. Is that what you really want, to give him that victory? No, I said after a moment. But I'm running out of options. Maybe not, she replied. I've been thinking about your expansion plan. I have some contacts who might be interested in investing. A week later, Gabrielle arranged a meeting with Janet Wu, a former colleague who ran a small venture capital fund focused on women entrepreneurs. I spent days preparing my pitch, refining my business model, and creating samples of my newest designs. The meeting took place in Janet's office, a sleek space that reminded me uncomfortably of Andrew's world. I pushed aside the insecurity and focused on presenting my vision, a line of customizable, ethically sourced jewelry with an innovative online design interface. Your idea has potential, Janet said when I finished, but what makes you think you can compete in the saturated jewelry market? I thought about everything I'd overcome in the past few months, because I understand both sides of the equation. I know what luxury buyers want because I lived in that world. I also know what matters to conscious consumers who care about the story behind what they wear. There's a market gap between those worlds that I can bridge. Janet nodded slowly. And your current legal situation? My business is legally separate from my marital assets. I explained, grateful for Thomas's foresight in establishing this early in the divorce proceedings. The judge ruled on that last week. 2 days later, I received the call that changed everything. Janet's fund would invest $75,000 in my company in exchange for a minor equity stake. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to rent a small workshop space, upgrade my online platform, and hire a part-time assistant. The investment came just as Andrew's interest in claiming my business waned. His own financial troubles had deepened, forcing him to focus on saving his company rather than punishing me. The divorce was finalized with minimal financial entanglement, a clean break that left me free to build my future. With capital to work with, I rebranded my company as Authentic Artistry, emphasizing the ethical sourcing of materials and the personal story behind each piece. I developed relationships with small-scale sustainable mines in several countries and created a transparent supply chain that customers could trace. The business grew steadily, with my first significant breakthrough coming when a fashion blogger with a large following featured my custom birthstone necklaces. Orders surged overnight, straining my limited production capacity, but providing the proof of concept I needed to approach larger retailers. A boutique chain with locations in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago agreed to carry a selection of my pieces, giving me my first physical retail presence. Seeing my jewelry displayed in elegant cases bearing my brand name brought tears to my eyes. I took a photo and almost sent it to Andrew before stopping myself. His validation no longer mattered. Through all these external successes, I was still rebuilding myself internally. Weekly therapy sessions helped me recognize and address the damage done to my self-worth during my marriage. I learned to separate constructive criticism from the echoes of Andrew's belittlement that still played in my head. You internalized his voice, my therapist explained. Now you need to replace it with your own. This internal work was harder than any business challenge. But gradually I began to trust my instincts again, to value my ideas, to believe in my vision. The breakthrough came when I developed a proprietary design for adjustable settings that could be resized by the wearer without jeweler intervention, a small innovation that would become the signature feature of my brand. When Authentic Artistry turned its first quarterly profit, I celebrated alone in my tiny apartment with takeout Thai food and a single glass of champagne. The next morning, I woke to an email from Andrew, the first direct contact in months. Saw your pieces at Ellington's boutique. Cute stuff. Glad the hobby is working out for you. His dismissive tone would have crushed me a year earlier. Now I simply deleted the message and went back to work. His opinion had become irrelevant to my story. 2 years after walking out of Andrew's penthouse, Authentic Artistry had grown into a respected small business with 7 employees and a dedicated workshop in Brooklyn's Industry City. Our direct-to-consumer model, with its focus on personalization and ethical sourcing, had struck a chord with a growing market of conscious luxury consumers. I had developed a custom online platform where customers could design their own pieces, choosing everything from metals to gemstones to settings. Each purchase included the story of where the materials came from and the artisans who crafted them. This transparency, unusual in the jewelry world, became our strongest selling point. My role had evolved from making every piece myself to leading a small team of skilled craftspeople. I still designed new collections, but much of my time was spent on business development, marketing, and establishing relationships with ethical suppliers around the world. The transition from artisan to entrepreneur wasn't always smooth. I made costly mistakes like ordering too much inventory before a holiday season and struggled with delegating tasks I once handled personally. But each challenge taught me valuable lessons about business management that no class could provide. My most successful innovation came from an unlikely source: social media storytelling. Rather than just showcasing the jewelry, we invited customers to share the personal stories attached to their pieces, weddings, anniversaries, personal achievements, or memorials for loved ones. These stories were featured on our website alongside professional photos of our designs. The campaign went viral when a customer shared how she had commissioned a custom pendant after surviving breast cancer, incorporating her birthstone with those of the family members who supported her through treatment. The emotional response to her story generated more engagement than any traditional advertising could have achieved. This success led to our first $1 million revenue year, a milestone I celebrated by taking my small team out for dinner and presenting each of them with custom pieces I had made personally. The next morning, I signed a lease on a larger workshop space and began interviewing for additional staff. During this period of growth, I attempted a brief relationship with Thomas, my attorney from the divorce, who had remained a supportive friend. Though we had a strong connection, the demands of scaling my business left little room for nurturing a new relationship. When we amicably parted ways after 3 months, I recognized that I wasn't yet ready to balance professional ambition with personal intimacy. "Your company is your primary relationship right now," Thomas observed with no bitterness. "That's not wrong, Layla. It's just where you are in your journey." He was right. Every spare moment and dollar went back into the business. I took online courses in business management, worked with an executive coach to develop my leadership skills, and joined entrepreneurial networks to learn from others' experiences. It was through one of these networks that I learned about the Women in Business Innovation Award, a prestigious recognition that included both financial support and mentorship from industry leaders. Though I doubted my chances, I submitted an application detailing Authentic Artistry's business model and social impact. To my shock, I was selected as a finalist, invited to present my company to a panel of judges that included several notable figures in retail and finance. The preparation consumed weeks of my life, but when I walked onto that stage, I felt a confidence I had never known before. "Authentic Artistry isn't just selling jewelry," I told the panel. "We're redefining the relationship between luxury products and ethical production. Every piece tells 2 stories: the customers and the journey of its creation." 2 weeks later, I received the call informing me that I had won. The award came with a $250,000 grant and a year of mentorship from Sandy Rivera, the former CEO of a major luxury goods conglomerate. Under Sandy's guidance, I refined my business strategy, streamlined operations, and prepared for significant scaling. With the award money and Sandy's endorsement, I secured additional venture funding that allowed us to move headquarters to a modern office building in Manhattan's Jewelry District. In a twist of fate, I couldn't have scripted the building was located just 1 block from Andrew's company headquarters. I occasionally spotted him on the street during lunch breaks, but he never noticed me. I had changed not just in confidence and success, but physically as well. Gone was the carefully coiffed society wife he had molded. My wardrobe now consisted of comfortable professional attire that reflected my personal style rather than his preferences. I wore my own designs, of course, each piece a tangible reminder of how far I had come. As Authentic Artistry continued to grow, I remained focused on our core mission rather than chasing rapid expansion. "Build something sustainable," Sandy advised. "Too many entrepreneurs flame out by growing too quickly." This measured approach served us well when competitors began to emerge attempting to copy our ethical sourcing model without the relationships and transparency we had established. Our authentic commitment to both quality and ethics allowed us to maintain our market position even as larger companies entered the space. By the end of our third year, Authentic Artistry had established partnerships with sustainable mining cooperatives in 6 countries, expanded our product line to include accessories beyond jewelry, and opened our first flagship retail location in Soho. Each step forward took me further from the woman who had once believed she needed Andrew Thompson to have value. I no longer measured success by comparison to his world. I had created something entirely my own, built on values he had dismissed as naive idealism. The greatest victory wasn't financial, but internal. I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth. 5 years after leaving my marriage, I barely recognized my own life. Authentic Artistry had grown beyond my wildest expectations, now valued at over $50 million with operations in 3 countries. Our pioneering approach to sustainable luxury had become a case study at business schools, and our transparent supply chain was influencing industry standards. I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant Julia rushed in clutching a magazine. "Layla, you need to see this," she said, placing the latest issue of Forbes on my desk. "Page 38. I flipped to the indicated page and felt a surreal jolt. There was my photo alongside a feature titled 30 Under 40 Entrepreneurs to Watch. The article praised Authentic Artistry's innovative business model and my journey from small-scale creator to industry disruptor. "They're calling you the future of ethical luxury," Julia said, beaming with pride. I stared at my own face on those glossy pages, remembering the young woman who had once believed she needed a man like Andrew to have value in the world. That woman seemed like a stranger now. Our expansion into international markets had been the biggest challenge and success of the past year. We had opened satellite offices in London and Bangkok, the latter serving as our hub for ethical sourcing throughout Southeast Asia. Each new location operated according to the same principles of transparency and sustainability that had defined us from the beginning. Along with growing the company, I had established the Authentic Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provided grants and mentorship to women entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation focused particularly on artisans and creators who lacked access to traditional business education and capital. "Your social impact initiatives are as impressive as your business metrics," the Forbes article noted. "Authentic Artistry seems determined to lift others as it rises." This recognition brought a wave of new opportunities and invitations, including one to speak at the Global Luxury Brand Summit, an annual gathering of industry leaders held at the Plaza Hotel, ironically the venue of my wedding to Andrew. I accepted despite my misgivings about returning to a space so loaded with memories. The evening of the summit arrived, and I took the stage to discuss the future of ethical luxury. The audience included executives from the world's most prestigious brands, many of whom had initially dismissed our business model as niche and unsustainable. Their attentive expressions now reflected a dawning recognition that consumer priorities were shifting toward the values we had championed from the start. After my presentation, I mingled during the cocktail reception, engaging with potential partners and fielding questions about our supply chain methodology. I was deep in conversation with the sustainability director of a major fashion house when a familiar voice spoke from behind me. "Layla Thompson, or is it back to Layla Davis now?" I turned to find Andrew standing there, looking older than I remembered. The confident smirk I knew so well seemed strained at the edges. "It's Layla Davis," I confirmed calmly, introducing myself to his companion, a tall blonde woman wearing an engagement ring that looked suspiciously similar to the one I had left behind. Andrew and I were previously married. "Ancient history," Andrew said with forced lightness. To my surprise, he added, "Congratulations on your feature in Forbes. Quite an achievement." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely startled by the acknowledgement. As his fiancée was drawn into another conversation, Andrew leaned closer. "You know, I always knew you had potential. I like to think I set you on this path, gave you a glimpse of what was possible." The audacity was so typically Andrew that I almost laughed. "Is that how you remember it?" "Well, you have to admit you learned a lot about the luxury market during our marriage," he persisted. "That knowledge has clearly served you well." I studied him, recognizing the subtle attempt to claim credit for my success. 5 years ago, this conversation would have left me shaking with anger or hurt. Now I felt only a mild curiosity about his need to rewrite our history. I did learn some valuable lessons from our time together, I acknowledged, just not the ones you intended to teach. His smile faltered slightly. Before he could respond, a photographer approached asking to take our picture for the event's social media. As we posed stiffly side by side, I noticed how the power dynamic between us had completely reversed. Once I had been the accessory to his success. Now he seemed eager to associate himself with mine. After the photographer moved on, Andrew's tone changed. How about a drink sometime to catch up properly? I'd love to hear more about your company's growth. Through mutual connections in the industry, I had heard that Andrew's firm was struggling to adapt to changing market conditions. His once bulletproof reputation had been tarnished by several failed investments and a public relations crisis involving unethical practices by one of his major clients. I appreciate the offer, but my schedule is quite full, I replied. I'm sure you understand how demanding it is to run a growing company. The subtle reminder that we were now peers, not mentor and protege, landed as intended. His expression tightened momentarily before he regained his composure. Of course. Perhaps another time. He hesitated, then added, Actually, I've been meaning to reach out about a potential partnership. My firm is looking to diversify into sustainable investments. Your expertise would be valuable. And there it was. Not a social invitation, but a business proposition. Andrew hadn't changed. He still saw relationships primarily as transactions. The difference was that now he needed something from me. We're quite selective about our partnerships, I said. But you're welcome to have your team send a proposal to our business development department. They evaluate all potential collaborations based on alignment with our values. He recognized the professional rebuff for what it was. Before he could respond, his fiancée returned, slipping her arm through his possessively as she eyed me with poorly concealed suspicion. We should circulate, she urged him. The Goldmans are looking for you. As they walked away, I caught a glimpse of Andrew glancing back at me. In that brief look, I saw something I had never expected to see in his eyes: recognition. Not of the waitress he had elevated, or the wife he had controlled, but of a woman who had surpassed him on his own terms. The photographer who had captured our interaction published the photo in a business journal the following week. The caption read, Worlds Collide Authentic Artistry founder Layla Davis discusses ethical luxury with former spouse investment banker Andrew Thompson. The image perfectly captured our new reality, Andrew looking slightly uncomfortable, me standing tall in my own success. I later heard through industry gossip that Andrew's new fiancée had demanded to know the details of our conversation, concerned by the interest he had shown in me. The thought that she might be experiencing the same insecurities he had once cultivated in me created a strange sense of compassion rather than satisfaction. That encounter at the summit crystallized something important for me. I had not only succeeded without Andrew, I had created a kind of success he couldn't fully comprehend. My company's value went beyond profit margins to include social impact and ethical leadership concepts that had never featured in his vision of achievement. More importantly, I had stopped measuring myself against him or anyone else. The validation I had once so desperately sought from him now seemed as irrelevant as his attempt to associate himself with my success. I had truly outgrown not just his world, but the need for his approval. 7 years had passed since I left my marriage with nothing but a suitcase and determination. Now at 34, I stood in the center of Authentic Artistry's headquarters, watching our team celebrate a historic milestone. After years of strategic growth and careful planning, we had successfully completed our initial public offering. The company's valuation had reached $500 million, a figure that still didn't seem quite real to me. The journey to this moment had been filled with challenges I couldn't have imagined when I started. Scaling ethically, maintaining our values, while satisfying investors and building a corporate culture that reflected our mission all tested my leadership in ways that made me grateful for every hardship that had helped me develop resilience. 2 weeks after our IPO, I was having breakfast with Gabrielle, who had remained my trusted advisor and friend through every phase of this journey. Have you seen this? She asked, sliding her tablet across the table to show me the latest Forbes list of self-made female entrepreneurs. My name appeared at number 17. It's surreal, I admitted. Sometimes I still feel like that waitress trying to put herself through community college. That waitress is exactly why you succeeded, Gabrielle replied. You never lost touch with where you came from, even as you built something extraordinary. Later that day, I received a notification on my rarely used personal Instagram account. Someone had tagged me in a post. It was a screenshot of the Forbes list shared by a mutual acquaintance from my life with Andrew. The caption read, "Congratulations to @Layla Davis on this incredible achievement. Some people underestimated you. They won't make that mistake again." The post had several comments, including one from Andrew's account. "Always knew she was destined for great things." The revisionist history was so typical that I almost laughed out loud. That evening, an email appeared in my personal inbox with Andrew's name. For a moment, I contemplated deleting it unread, but curiosity won out. "Layla," it began, "I saw your name on the Forbes list today and felt compelled to reach out. What you've built is truly remarkable. I know we didn't part on good terms, but I want you to know that I recognize the extraordinary woman you've become. Perhaps I always knew your potential, even if I didn't know how to support it properly. I said many things during our marriage that I regret none more than suggesting you couldn't reach my status. You've not only matched it, you've created an entirely new standard. Congratulations. Andrew." I read the email twice, noting the subtle mix of genuine acknowledgement and self-serving narrative. The old Layla might have treasured this validation, might have even responded with gratitude. The woman I had become recognized it for what it was, a belated attempt to associate himself with my success. Rather than reply, I forwarded the email to my therapist with a simple note, "Final chapter closed." Then I returned to reviewing plans for Authentic Foundation's new mentorship program for female entrepreneurs. Looking back on the path that had brought me here, I felt profound gratitude for both the triumphs and the struggles. The painful ending of my marriage had become the catalyst for discovering my true capabilities. The dismissal of my ambitions had fueled a determination to prove not just Andrew wrong, but the limiting beliefs I had internalized. My mentorship program had become the most personally fulfilling aspect of my success. Working with young women from backgrounds similar to mine, I shared both practical business knowledge and the harder-won wisdom about self-worth. Your value isn't determined by someone else's limited vision of you, I often told them, but by your courage to envision a greater possibility for yourself. My personal life had evolved as well. After years of focusing primarily on building my business, I had found balance and love with Jordan, a professor of environmental science whose work complemented my commitment to sustainability. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine partnership, the elements that had been so conspicuously absent in my marriage. Last month, I had purchased my dream home, a restored brownstone in Brooklyn, paid for entirely with my own money. The satisfaction of signing those papers, knowing that every penny had been earned through my own efforts, surpassed any luxury I had experienced in Andrew's penthouse. I had also reconciled with parts of my past that once caused me shame. My humble beginnings, which Andrew and his circle had viewed as a deficiency, I now recognized as the source of my strongest qualities: resourcefulness, empathy, and authentic connection to the people my business served. The community college education he had dismissed had laid the foundation for my practical approach to business problems. When Jordan and I hosted dinner parties, I sometimes shared stories from my waitressing days, no longer embarrassed by that chapter of my life, but appreciative of how it had shaped me. Every experience, even the painful ones, had contributed to building the woman I had become. The woman Andrew had married no longer existed. In her place stood someone far stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more successful than either of us could have imagined. Not because I had set out to surpass him, but because I had finally embraced the fullness of who I could be outside his shadow. The greatest lesson I learned through this journey wasn't about business strategy or financial success. It was about recognizing that true status has nothing to do with the external trappings of wealth or social position. Real status comes from living authentically, contributing meaningfully, and valuing yourself enough to walk away from anyone who doesn't. The freedom I found wasn't just financial independence, though that certainly helped. It was the profound liberation of defining success on my own terms, of building a life aligned with my values, rather than someone else's expectations. As I look to the future, I remain committed to creating opportunities for others to discover their own potential, especially those who have been told their dreams are too big or their backgrounds too humble. Because if my story proves anything, it's that the greatest achievements often begin when someone says, "You'll never succeed," and you decide to prove them wrong. I wonder how many of you watching have had someone underestimate your potential or try to dim your light. Has anyone ever tried to put limits on what you could accomplish? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who might need this reminder of their own power. Remember, the only person who can truly define your worth is you. Thank you for listening to my story.